So anyone who's been around City Lights long enough knows how much we love Dana Spiotta's work, going all the way back to Eat the Document and beyond. We've been huge fans. Wayward continues in the footsteps of a really stellar body of writing that is at once exhilarating, erudite, hilarious, at times emotionally piercing, and always stimulating a deeper dialogue about self and place. A new novel by Dana Spiotta is an event in and of itself, and we are greatly honored to have her back with us again. So Dana is the author of 5 novels, which include Innocence and Others, winner of the St. Francis College Literary Prize, as well as Lightning Field and Stone Arabia, which was a National Book Critics Circle Award finalist. In 2017, the American Academy of Arts and Letters awarded her the John Updike Prize in Literature. She makes her home in Syracuse, New York, and teaches in the Syracuse University MFA program. Joining her in conversation is Mona Awad, an award-winning novelist and short fiction writer. She is the author of the novel 13 Ways of Looking at a Fat Girl, as well as the novel Bunny. Her new novel, All's Well, is going to be released this coming August with Simon & Schuster. She has worked as a bookseller. She's worked all over the place, places like Pages in Toronto, the King's English Bookshop in Salt Lake City, Blackwell's in Edinburgh. She's also worked as a freelance journalist and food columnist for the Montreal-based magazine Maisonneuve. Her writing has appeared in the New York Times, McSweeney's, Time Magazine, Electric Literature, Vice, and many others. She has taught creative writing at numerous universities, including Brown University, the University of Denver, Tufts, amongst others. She is currently an assistant professor in the creative writing program at Syracuse University and makes her home in Boston. We are thrilled to have both of them with us tonight. So it is such a great pleasure to have both of you here with us today, gracing our virtual halls. Dana Spiotta, Mona Awad, welcome to City Lights Live.
Thank you so much, Peter. Thanks for that amazing introduction. I'm going to start off with a short reading, about a 5-minute reading from the book. And I guess I will just set it up by saying that the book takes place in 2017. And the character that we're hearing from here, her name is Sam. She lives in Syracuse. She's in her early 50s. She's going through sort of her perimenopausal changes. And she has started to work out with a personal trainer, lifting weights. Her personal trainer's name is Nico. Nico was 25 and in top shape. He was constantly on a cut, or else he was on a bulk. But he always looked the same to her, young, perfect, ridiculous. And he talked constantly about body science and cutting-edge workout theories. As she trained with him, their interactions so bodily intimate and yet almost entirely shallow. Sam developed a fascination for these bro science types, not the roidy bodybuilders, but the natural performance athletes like Nico. When she drove to her boring daily errands, or just drove, she began listening to hardcore fitness podcasts in which one bro interviewed another. Walk me through your bulk protocol. Everyone was always walking you through something on these podcasts. She learned about slow regression, pyramid sets, flipping truck tires, body by science, Navy SEAL fit, kinesiology tape, Wim Hof and warrior breathing, sledgehammers, log PT, rope climbs, wall ball throws, the benefits of hyperoxygenating or hypooxygenating, kettlebells, reverse pyramid sets, slow twitch versus fast twitch muscle fibers. Was it possible that inhabiting a human body was this complicated, she asked Nico at one point, more or less joking, but humor was lost on him. It is if you want to reach your highest potential, if you want to make real gains. What did she want? Did she want gains? Who didn't want gains over subtractions? Quantifiable, trackable, tape measure gains. There were the podcasts and then the YouTube videos, and Nico in real life, the in the flesh embodiment of a fully cultivated male body. Never before had she cared about these things, but here she was. Her middle-aged fascination with these young, hyper-fit men was a mystery to her. It was not sexual, not at all, almost the opposite. She gawked at them and their robust narcissism, wondrous beings who felt no shame in exhibiting their vain pursuit of perfection. In fact, they bragged about it. They weren't self-absorbed, they were optimizing. Not just looking better, they insisted, but improving lifespan, not just lifespan, but health span, which meant you looked and felt good. You became and remained a paragon human specimen. You attended the unquestioning goal of getting ever stronger, lowering body fat, building lean muscle mass, the daily hours in the gym, the measuring of dietary macros, tabulating blood sugar and ketones and heart rate. They consider themselves biohackers, pushing their bodies into whatever shapes they wanted, fitter, stronger, better look, and better performance. But she wondered, better performance of what? Strength for what? And enhanced lifespan to do what? The rigor and discipline she got, the community, sure. The endorphin release, definitely. Endorphins were a form of endogenous morphine. They did make you feel a kind of body bliss. But the precious treatment of your own lifespan, the obsessive yet superficial self-betterment, the fetishy focus on the body, the relentless and desperate pursuit of constant improvement. And although it might seem that strengthening meant no longer weakening and that pursuing gains stopped or even reversed the decline we all experienced, this couldn't be true. Your body went in one direction, didn't it? It wound up and then slowly wound down. Her whacked periods were a clear sign of the direction her body was taking. Maybe for men, it felt like less of an overt direction. But beyond the futility of body gains, what amazed her was their persistent insistence on boosting the self when the world, and this country in particular, was in disgraceful shambles, the progressing, ever-widening gulf of disparity in every sphere. And were we not also on the verge of an environmental apocalypse? People seem more fixated than ever on notions of self-tend, self-care, self. In the current context, wasn't naked pursuit of health obscene? The self-contemplation down to the microbiomic makeup of your alimentary system, yet such contemplation was divorced from any reflection. This seemed now more than ever the most American of myopias, this unapologetic, boastful even attention to the surface self. It sort of made sense though, a retreat to the local, the hyper-local and controllable, your heart, your lungs, your flesh. Fecal transplants, stem cell injections, increase mitochondrial sensitivity. One set to failure, Nico said. Isn't that what we are all doing? One set to failure, she joked, but he just smiled and lifted his glorious, chiseled, unwavering chin at the barbell. Let's go, Sam.
Oh my God, I love it. That section just epitomizes everything that I love about this novel. I'm so excited to be talking with Dana Spiotta. She's not only an incredibly brilliant writer, but she's also my colleague at Syracuse. I just joined the faculty, and so now we teach together in the creative writing program. So I got to know you a little bit over this past year. And I was so excited to read your book, Dana, because it is, and I said this earlier today when I posted about it, it's scorching. It's timely, it's vivid, it's deeply moving. George Saunders called it urgent, and I would agree. I think that this book speaks profoundly and fearlessly, as the section that you read just so perfectly captures the times that we're living in right now. So I definitely want to ask you a bit about that passage and some of the tensions in that passage, but I'll start us off just by maybe having you talk a little bit about Sam. She's such a complex character, and what I really connected with about her is just her profound sense of alienation, especially from women of her own race, of her own age, of her own class. And I guess I wondered how she came to you, what drew you to kind of exploring this particular character?
Well, thank you so much for all those nice comments, and that means a lot to me coming from you, Mona. I think Sam, I'm very interested in people when they are in that, where they find themselves able to kind of change in some way or try to change in some way, that some kind of crisis point where they can see themselves with clarity. I think that's always been an interest of mine. And she's having a kind of identity crisis, and part of the first part of the book are all these different ideas about what is precipitating that. But she blows up her life in the beginning of the book. She falls in love with this house, and she leaves her husband, her perfectly comfortable suburban life, And I think she's not happy with who she finds herself to be in midlife, and she doesn't feel prepared for what's to come. These big mortal questions, losing her mother and her daughter leaving home. And she's so she has some self-loathing, I think, in the beginning, and that radiates out. She has she's got a lot of she feels a lot of she's very conflicted. So she has these kind of she's kind of trashing this way of being, and yet she's engaging in it, right? So she leaves her husband, and yet she's still sleeping with him. I mean, so she's kind of going in multiple directions. She's a torn person, but she's trying to figure it out.
Yeah. I think that's what I love about her. There's a real honesty in the portrayal of her consciousness, how she's always kind of interrogating her initial judgments, her initial feelings. She's always interrogating them and ruminating. And it feels like a very honest place to be in her mind. So I really love that about Sam. I think,
and she does try. She kind of revises her opinions on the fly as she and she doesn't, I think, implicate herself. As much as she judges others, she really is the hardest on herself.
Oh yeah,
right.
Yeah, that really, really comes through, I think, in her character. That's one of the things about her that I think is so. Even as alienated as she feels, that's something that I really connected with, and I think other readers will too, is that she has that quality. I think another aspect of her, another thing that's kind of informing her choices and maybe her feelings, her emotional state, is the election. The book is set in 2017 after the election, and I think the election plays a very catalyzing role in the events that follow. Her decision to leave her husband, to leave the house, to buy another one. Can you talk about what it was like to write about this era that we're currently living in, and what drew you to want to explore this time?
Well, it seemed when I was writing the book was, when I started writing the book was 2016. And it seemed, I think part of your job as a novelist is kind of to talk about what it's like to be alive now. And it would really be impossible to talk about anyone in America without talking about the Trump election and the kind of, the destabilization of that for everyone. And I think particularly for this character who she feels a complicity with it. She's appalled and shocked, and then sort of angry at herself for being shocked, because obviously she knows that this disparity has existed. She knows that this racism has existed. She knows that this misogyny has existed. It's been apparent. It's, she's ignorant but not innocent of that. So I think in midlife she feels somewhat, invested in the status quo, and so therefore responsible for where America finds itself in 2016. So I think that that feeling, and I think that there was a particular moment in that election that felt so hateful towards older women, honestly. That came out against Hillary Clinton, but it was just palpable how easy it was for the culture to disdain older women. And I think that really spoke to her as well, but also partially because she also kind of disdains older women, even though she's one. She's like, hey, I hate all these bitches too. And so it's not a good place to be when you have that internalized judgment of self. And
I know, but it's wonderfully freeing to read it, because we all have these thoughts, right, about ourselves. I mean, women just have this internalized misogyny. So to give voice to it, I think, is again just being true to this consciousness that you're occupying in Sam. One of the things I love about her and can connect to as well, and maybe this has something to do with the time, is her rage. She's very angry, and it's a source of humor in the book, but it's very, I mean, I felt it too. I connected with it very meaningfully, because I think it extends beyond just her personal experience. It's a rage at the experience of being alive right now. And there's a great line on page 144. I won't spoil it for anybody, where her anger causes her to kind of cross this line, and she surprises herself. And there's this wonderful quote where she says that, where you write, she knew she had no right to be angry, no reason, But this was the time for this feeling of no reason. Rage was in the air, stupid, impulsive, the age of no reason. I love that, the age of no reason. I'm curious how this deep exploration of rage and this capturing of an age of no reason might have informed the shape of the book or the process of writing it.
Well, anger is interesting. I mean, rage is interesting because it really costs you a lot when you express it, or at least that's been my experience, where you sort of feel, maybe this is particular to women, but you feel very sort of humiliating to lose your temper if somebody tells you that you're not lifting the right weights at the gym or something. You know, some young man decides to give you tips, and which Sam does. She gets really ragey on this guy, and feels feels that it bad about it for a while. But sometimes rage is appropriate, right? Sometimes rage is appropriate, but it's hard to control these feelings. And then on top of it, and honestly, there's this hormonal thing going on where this feeling of, it's not that the feelings aren't real, but that your ability to suppress them has gone away. And so she finds herself, frightens herself because she has road rage, and she has, you know, she gets upset on the plane when, you know, it's mostly directed at men, but she feels it, and she feels she feels it also, I think, bothers her because it reminds her of this ragey grief, you know, grievance president that was elected. So that the grievance that comes from him and from his followers, that is, you know, it's not good if everyone's just mad in ragey directions and feels entitled to that, right? So so I think she's trying to work her way through it to something that's more productive and directed and appropriate, rather than just humiliating. Yeah.
Did it feel good to write about the rage? Because maybe, you know, I'm just curious how
it's so funny because, you know, you write characters and they have a little part of yourself that you then exaggerate, right?
Yeah.
So I will confess to having some road rage moments in the privacy of my car, about like people who don't know how to zipper merge or something, or cut in. But what's fun is that when you're writing fiction, you can exaggerate that and play it out to this extent that you would never do in real life. So she takes these incredible risks, you know, that I wouldn't take. And that is kind of interesting to sort of see. I mean, everything from blowing up her life to chopping off her hair to killing that guy's car to, you know, I can see the consequences of it in her. So it's not as though I feel for this character because I think she's out of control, you know. But I think the same way about Allie, her daughter, is also doing these really dangerous things with her life. And it's something that's I can play out in fiction and sort of see the consequences of it. And that's very interesting to me, because Allie has a lot of my own impulses too, from when I was 17. That's the daughter in the book. And so that kind of, these characters kind of growing out of these, they're much more reckless than I would be. Yeah. Makes them interesting, which makes them interesting.
Oh yeah, no, it makes it very fraught to read it. There's a lot of tension because they're capable of anything. Anything is possible, because they're kind of both at a precipice. Can you read a little bit of Allie's section? You do.
Okay.
Yeah. This
is very short. So, whoops, if I can find it, page 99. Let's see. So Allie is 17. She's very precocious. Sorry, bear with me. And estranged from her mother. She's not talking to her mother because her mother has left. And so we see her point of view in some of the chapters, and we see Sam's point of view in other chapters. Sex was another thing that was not at all what everyone said it was. It wasn't informed consent like in health class, a script of can I and yes. It was a suicide pact, and equal danger and transgression on both sides was part of what made it exciting. They both needed jeopardy for the connection to be equal. On her side, she could get found out by her parents, she could get pregnant, and if she sent him photos, he would have them, could make some kind of revenge porn out of them. Because the texting was going to include photos, wasn't it? They both knew without saying that photos came with the text. The thought of it, of the transgression, was part of the blooming feeling. The one thing everyone had drilled into her since 5th grade was not to send anyone naked photos ever. Don't believe boys when they promise never to show them to anyone or that they will delete them. But, and in this she was romantic really, even if it sounded otherwise, she would send him photos. What was the point of sex and love if you didn't trust the other person completely? If you were already gaming out the breakup and the after fallout, then you were just acting in bad faith. She had read her Sartre, but she had also read her Kant, and she had read her Rawls, or in any case, she'd read their Wikipedia pages, which were quite extensive. She knew what bad faith was. What all the concerned adults advised was degrading, crude, such as if you do send a naked pic, never show your face with your body. Again, so cynical. They actually want you to disembody yourself, separate your identity from your body to protect you. Everything is doomed if you expect so little of the world, if you expect so little of other people. Besides, what are they protecting you from? Even in the scenario that the snap finds its way out from his phone into the wider spheres of the internet, the humiliation, apparently profound and suicide-inducing, of having your body exposed to be shown in a private act of desire. The message is clear. Our private self must be a source of shame, and the photo will last forever, they warn. You can never scrub it once it's unleashed, which used to terrify her. But she no longer felt that way, terrified. On the one hand, they say they want the culture to be body positive, but when you get down to it, the concerned adults are very wary of your body. I can't hear you, Mona.
There, I think I'm back.
I missed that. Okay.
There was a second where I wasn't sure if I was able to unmute myself. But I love that section. I love that idea of the private self being a source of shame. I'd never thought about it. I'd never thought about it like that. But there was something about being in that younger person's consciousness that made me see my own inclination to be private differently. And I thought that was really interesting. So I was curious if occupying that consciousness kind of illuminated Sam, or was there anything about Sam when you occupied Allie's consciousness that surprised you?
Yeah, in fact, I think the book only came alive when I thought I was going to narrate it mostly from Sam, exclusively from Sam's point of view when I first started. And then I just thought I need to, there was a scene, I had this idea of a scene, and it could be seen from the mother's point of view or the daughter's point of view, where they're fighting when she's 14 about how she's dressed going to the mall. Right. And I thought, I'm going to write this from the daughter's point of view. And it just worked so much. It became so clear to me that the daughter was both very much like her mother, but also really wanting to define herself away from her mother, and how overbearing her mother felt to her, and how essential this was for her to become herself. And then the pulling between the two of them, back and forth. And so, and once I started writing Allie, she came so alive to me. And yeah, part of it was what I'm remembering being 17 and just feeling, your brain is so smart when you're 17. It's as good as your brain gets, right? But you have no experience. And you think you know things you just don't know, right? And people can't really talk you out of it. You feel smarter than all the adults. And actually, and that's a really dangerous place to be. And so that came up, that she was having this, I don't think I'm blowing, you find out right away, she's having an affair with a much older man who's also her mentor. And she, and keeping it secret from everyone, especially her mother. Yeah.
No, I know they're both very suspenseful plot lines, because these women, I think, they're both crossing these lines, you know, and they're both wading into very dangerous territory. They're both wayward, you know, in their own ways. And that I found that really exciting. I guess this is a good time to ask this question about female bodies. There are just so many eviscerating yet incredibly tender descriptions of female bodies in this book. I was blown away by how you captured that kind of constantly changing, just dynamic, very conflicted relationship that we can have with our own bodies, especially Sam. Her body is aging, and the way that she sees other women's bodies who are aging. You know, I think this book is interested in kind of very frankly and fearlessly grappling with what that experience is like. It frankly, in a way I've never read before. It was just so honest. So I wondered if you had any literary or artistic models for this, or did it feel like uncharted territory? Yeah, I was just curious about that.
Well, one of the things I was really thinking about, and I know you write about the body a lot too, and I do, I think the more that technology dominates our lives, and this feeling that technology is this abstract thing that we all engage with all the time, the more interest I am in a writer in locating things on the body. It just becomes sort of the only way to understand people is to talk about what it feels like to be in their body and to inhabit their body. And I do think that it is such a dramatic time in your life. Allie is going through adolescence. It's such a dramatic change in your body. And then at the same time as her mother's going through menopause, another dramatic change in body. And it's in both cases, the hormones are messing with your mind too. So it's very combustible. And so it'd be impossible to tell the story without talking about the body. But I also, and I think one of the things I really wanted to make clear in this is that in this book, I really was determined not to have Sam's issue be that she was sad about looking old or her beauty going. I really wanted that not, like, she doesn't look in the mirror because she just doesn't care about how she looks.
That's true.
And once I had that, I was like, okay, I know who this person is. She does not care about how she looks. It's not about her neck waddles or what the F. She just doesn't like that she's gonna die, basically.
Yeah.
And this is a sign that that's happening and she hasn't done enough yet. So she's in a panic, but it's not about losing beauty or attractiveness. She just, and so that was really the key for me, is that I feel like there's a kind of cliche that when women reach middle age, the real trauma is that they're no longer these desirable, these objects of desire, and they're invisible. And yeah, being invisible is stinks because people ignore you, but doesn't stink because people don't hit on you all the time. That's the good part. So I really wanted to get away from those cliches. And I also didn't want her to be left by her husband, which is also the other thing that happens in a lot of cultural representations of middle-aged women. I wanted her to be the one to leave, even if she doesn't have any real good reasons to leave, maybe that's all the more interesting.
Yeah, no, I thought it really defies those kinds of cliches. That's why I was curious about models, because it felt like uncharted territory to me. She experiences wonder at her body changing. There's wonder too, which I found really interesting. And kind of talking about decline, thinking about death, and because this book is interested in exploring death and decline and extinction, kind of facing that very frankly. So along with that narrative, there's also this, and that's why I love that section you read in the beginning. There's this very contrary bro notion of progress and velocity, and this idea that you can somehow game your own physiology with apps and hacks and beat, if not mortality, then at least its appearance, right? It feels like a very American, as you point out, a very American impulse, a very human impulse, ultimately, the desire to kind of optimize and potentiate. You use those words in the book. I love how you play with the language of self-betterment. And Sam isn't immune. Like, she recognizes, I think, the futility and absurdity, but she's not immune to it. So I'm curious about that tension between the inevitability of decline and then this kind of impulse to game, control, deny, and how that might have informed the story.
Yeah, I mean, I think you put your finger on it. I think it's about control. you know, I think that there's a real loss of control for her in that she can't control her daughter or what happens to her daughter. She can't control what's happened in the country, you know, the world around her, or she feels that it's out of control. And she can't control what's happening to her mother. And so the plane of the body is very appealing, and she does, you know, really like lifting weights and becoming strong. You know, it's exciting. And so I think there's that contradiction makes sense to me, you know, that you kind of want that feeling of some area of control, just like when she doesn't eat and then she has a piece of cake or something and she kind of,
right,
you know, the body pleasures too, right? Or she's going to have sex with her husband, and this is much better than when they were back in the suburbs. I think, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great things about having a body, right? And that's something she doesn't let go of. In fact, she finds a new way to it, I think.
Yeah, no, I love that about
cigarettes. That's a flagrant disrespect to your body that she enjoys, and that I miss so much.
I know, me too. I miss it. I have all my characters smoke because I miss smoking so much.
Yeah.
At least I'm smoking in my stories. But yeah, that's actually a really good segue to talking about the house, because I definitely want to talk about Sam's relationship to the house that she buys in this kind of rundown neighborhood of Syracuse, and we'll talk about Syracuse too. She has this deep passion for old buildings and for architecture. And in some ways, I think her relationship to architecture and to this old, beautiful house especially feels like a natural extension of her kind of observations and interests in the body and the book's exploration of the human body, both in its youth and its decline. So can you talk a little bit about the role of architecture in the book, and if you see a relationship to the book's exploration of bodies, human bodies?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are a lot of these beautiful rundown buildings in central New York and in Syracuse, and sometimes they take your breath away. You'll just see them, and it'll feel that there's a secret code to the city. You know, most cities feel this way, that you notice something and it's just got a whole story behind it, and it's all in plain sight, and you just don't notice it. So I think she responds to the kind of, when she sees this beautiful old house that's completely falling apart, she thinks that only she can see the beauty in it, because it's kind of true, right? Everybody's given up on it, and so she's tender towards this house. So and it feels solid, and it's a part of a body pleasure too, which is, I think we're shaped by the spaces that we live in, and she believes that she has a different kind of life if she's in a different kind of space, and I think that is true of architecture, and it's true of geography too. You're a different person in central New York than you are in Northern California, or you are in Los Angeles. And so that to kind of describe how we're shaped, who we are is shaped by the cultural moment we're in, but it's also shaped by the architecture that inhabits us, and the body our identity that we have. All these things shape what we think of as self. And so that seemed really interesting to me. And her affection for it also kind of led me into these ideas of this kind of American amnesia that I kind of have always had an interest in, that there's all this interesting history of alternative culture, of course, that we just kind of forget about or pave over or erase. And it's to our discredit, because there's a lot of, it's a lot more heterodox than we've been led to believe, and weird old American stuff. Yeah, has grown up.
I agree. Was there a particular house that you saw that maybe inspired the book?
Yeah, that house that I describe in the book, I have the blueprints up here on my wall. That exists. Yeah, it's like 7 blocks west, and I used to walk by it all the time, and it would just get more and more decaying and ruined. And now I think it's beyond repair, but I've never been inside it. It's all boarded up. I tried to break inside it, but I'm not as Sam. I was frightened of rodents. She's not frightened of rodents, but I am. she's like, she hears scurrying and she's like, yeah, that's fine. That's not me. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of blown away by how fearless she was, actually, because I was very afraid to do the things that she does. But that's what's so exciting about being in this world and being with her in this world. And I guess that's a good segue into talking about Syracuse, since we're talking about the house. I love that the book is set in Syracuse. I don't think I've read a novel set in Syracuse before, but I can't imagine this book being set anywhere else. So can you share what about Syracuse excited you as a setting for this particular story?
Well, I think it is, it has such an interesting history.
Yeah.
It's been a kind of center of a lot of things. I mean, with the Iroquois and the Five Nations in its beginnings, and then through the Erie Canal era and through the 19th century, all the reform movements, the women's movement started very near Syracuse. The abolition movement had a very big part of Syracuse because it was a way to get out to Canada,
right?
Up the St. Lawrence River or on the Erie Canal. And so it's had this really kind of, and it had all these utopian sort of, this perfectionist community, Oneida, that plays a role in the book. That just seems fascinating to me. I think there's a lot of room up here for experiments and living because it's this kind of desolate place in a lot of ways. And that just fascinated me that in the 19th century, there were all these, and then all the way to the west with the burned over district, there were these kind of weird religious cults, and women often had big roles in them because we're allowed to be different than they were in Victorian society. They could be like, they could just be Shakers and cancel sex, or they could go to Oneida and they could cut their hair off and have complex marriage. Of course, there were dark sides to these.
Yes, yeah, you have one of these figures in your book. That was one of the most delightful.
That's true. That about Oneida. That's an imaginary character. This character that I have in the book.
Clara Loomis.
Yeah, Clara Loomis. She's imaginary, but Oneida is very much real, and their eugenics stuff was very much real. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, no, it's that was really, really interesting. And again, there's a connection there between her voice and then the voice of Sam and Allie too. They're all on this precipice. They're all crossing these lines and running away. And I love that across all of these different characters. I'll ask you, I guess this is a good segue into talking about structure. The structure is so compelling and sort of mysterious to me because its movement feels very organic and very connected to not only grander cultural events, but to Sam's ruminative mind also, So I guess I'll ask a little bit about process. Can I ask you how the structure of the book revealed itself to you?
Yeah, I mean, I did think it would be Sam, and then I thought it'd be Sam and Allie. And I had this idea that scenes would kind of dilate, like that scene, and you'd kind of break in, someone would mention the election, and then you'd go back in time and there would be this big election section, and then you'd come back. And I don't know why, I just thought that was a way to tell the story once I had her voice. And I didn't really know what was going to happen in the second part of the book where the structure does go wayward in this big way. But as I was writing it, it just felt that was what needed to happen, this associative leap. And I kind of think of it as like the book itself has a kind of consciousness that develops as you're writing it. And then that kind of pushes you towards the end. The book starts to show you things. And it's not tethered to this opening style of being with either Sam or with Allie. And then it kind of goes back to Sam at the end. I mean, without saying too much to reveal too much. I think it's nice if you don't expect it too much. Yeah.
Yeah, it was very surprising. And it didn't feel, the structure just felt so organic to it, even though it was very suspenseful. There was so much tension. It never felt engineered, it just felt natural. And I love that about it. So I was quite blown away by the structure. I'll ask you, we've been talking about the title, so I want to ask you about the title. I just love this book's deep interest in language. You know, I love the bro language of self-betterment is so brilliant. The texting language, the social media language, even the etymology of certain words. But it did make me think the word wayward, you choose your words so carefully. So I have to ask, when did that word come to you? When did that title come to you?
I just kept thinking, I mean, it's a nice, the wayward and froward and
Yeah.
there's just something very bodily about those kinds of, I think they're Anglo-Saxon.
Yes.
Yes, they have that kind of bite to them, you know.
Yeah.
And they're, the two W's are just so beautiful, that looks beautiful. You know, sometimes with words, it's just the sculptural quality they have on the page is appealing. There's a kind of balance to them. So it seemed like an interesting word to me.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think it's so perfect for so many different parts of the book, for the characters, for the structure, for the subversive quality of it. It's like fundamental subversive quality. This book is so brutally honest about where we are in America right now, just where we are as a human race, you know, systemic racism, Trumpism, climate change. But as rageful and scary as it is, and it truly does feel like a reckoning in many ways, it's also filled with great wonder and tenderness and love. And I do think that Sam has a hopefulness, you know, in spite of how clearly she is able to perceive certain truths, I think, about living in America right now. So I guess I'm curious if you were surprised to find hopefulness there, if you think this is a hopeful book, ultimately.
I don't know how to answer that, you know. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, you know, I have a daughter, so I do feel very invested in holding on to hope.
Yeah.
But I want to be clear-eyed. I want to have clarity about it. I don't want to be deluded, and I want to be responsible. So I think she ends up in a place where she at least has clarity about where she is and what she can do. And I like that she's going to strive to do better. I mean, I think that's a good life if you really can inhabit that space for a while. So whether she succeeds at that, I don't know. I don't know.
I think it's good to leave it open. But I like, to me, it feels hopeful, ultimately, as honest as it is and as dark as it goes. It feels hopeful to me, which is good. I need hope right now.
So we need to go. I think we might need to go to questions pretty soon, if there are any. I don't know.
Yeah, I see a couple. I'll just ask you one more thing.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wasn't.
Oh no, you're fine. You're fine.
The time, yeah, okay.
Just as a fellow writer, I have to ask this question.
Okay, go for it. You're asking amazing questions, like so beautiful.
This one's just like I gotta know. This is your fifth novel. You're such a brilliant writer. Does it get easier as you go? I mean, was this easier? Was this more challenging? Be honest.
You know the answer to this, Mona.
Yeah, I know.
But
I want to know what you have to say.
Do it right. It never is easy. It's just a different kind of hard, right?
Right.
It kind of gets harder actually because you can't repeat yourself. And the only thing, and I do get the feeling, which you must have too, where you think after you're done, you're thinking, how did I do that? How I'm never going to be able to write another book because there's so much work and so much of your life, and it's intense. And then I think afterwards you just feel spent for a while, you know, and it seems like it was something that happened to someone else. So I do think it gets really, I don't think it gets easier at all. Sorry, but you know that.
No, I know. I just, I had to know. I had to hear it from you. Yeah, but that feels like the truth to me. Absolutely.
You know what does help is that you like, when you're stuck, when you're feeling crap about it, you know you've been there before and that isn't fatal, you know, that's part of the process. And when you first start out, you don't know that, and that's very frightening. Yeah. But when you've written a couple of books, you realize, oh, there's always a time where you hate it, you know?
Yeah. Oh my goodness, yeah. I'm there right now with the new thing. So. Okay, yeah, so there are some questions here. Let me ask you this one from Andrew. Can you talk about your opening line sentences? They're always so evocative and pull me in immediately. When was the opening of Wayward written in the overall writing process, and how and why did you decide to use a short chapter?
Oh, that's a really good question. It actually opened the first version of it opened with the stand-up that Sam does later. And this was right after that. It was going to start with that and then go to this. But I think once I got this rhythm, that short chapter, it just felt very intuitive to me to have these beats. Right. And then with those weird dilations too, it just felt like I wanted that white space and that break, and I can't explain it more than that. I wish I'm appreciative that you noticed it, because it feels so much. It's so much the identity of the book to me now, the way it opens. It's hard for me to believe that it had this other opening, which was kind of cheesy. It was like, let me show you, it was this oldest trick in the book, which is like you jump ahead. It's like a TV trick. You jump ahead and then you go back and everyone's wondering, when is that going to come? It's not a bad trick. It's a good trick. That's why everybody does it. But it was like, you shouldn't make it out of order unless you have a good reason to make it out of order, right? So I think starting with the moment she falls in love with the house kind of gave me the right place, as my old teacher Gordon Lish used to say, the place to put your pencil, right? Yeah. And fix it and say, okay, this is where it starts and it grows from here. And there is this weird sense of growing, like the chapters almost grow bigger as they go forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it has something to do too with architecture, and you like the look of Wayward, you like the look of and it's almost like a door that you open into the world.
Oh, I love that idea. Yeah. Good. Great.
So Jake Shore asks, particularly with higher education, there's tons of true and important talk about the hard work that goes into becoming a truly great writer. But do you think higher ed politely avoids accurately addressing the importance of blindingly raw talent?
Of what?
Of blindingly raw talent.
Oh, that's a good question. You mean about teaching writing? I honestly believe that I've seen many, we both teach in this MFA program that gets amazing students. And I've seen blindingly talented students go nowhere.
Yeah.
Because it isn't, I'm not saying that talent isn't important, but it's not the only thing that matters. A lot of it is just wanting it and working really hard at it. And I've seen that the students that do kind of have these breakthroughs are the ones who are just reading and writing like maniacs, taking it all in. And some of the really talented ones just kind of fall away. So yeah, I think but if you love reading, I really believe if you really love reading, I believe you can be a good writer. Whether you're going to be a great writer, I don't know. But I do think you can learn a lot from reading and from other writers. I mean, and that's essentially what an MFA program is reading with other writers, and being around people who care about that stuff. But a lot of it is I think the unidentifiable thing is talent, sure, whatever that means. But a lot of it's drive. Like, how bad do you want this? Because it's a weird life. It's not really, you don't make a lot of money doing it.
No.
So, and you're like very marginal in the culture, so you have to really, really want it. And that is something you can't make somebody have if they don't have it. I don't know. What do you think, Mona, about that question?
Yeah, no, I think you're so right. I really think it's work. Ultimately, it's work. It's wanting to push past what you perceive to be your own limits. And that takes so much time. And it's nothing you can predict. So there's like a bit of mysteriousness to it. How long is it going to take for me to reach that point? You just have to work, I think, incredibly hard. I mean, for me, that's the most exciting thing. When I reach the edge of what I think is possible and I keep going, and then I realize, oh no, that's not the edge. There's this whole other world beyond that I can go into. And that's, but you have to work to get there, to get to that, to get past that edge, you know? Okay, so from Sid, how do you spot the great writers in your MFA classes? I guess this is kind of connected. I am a BFA student studying from Canada. Hi, Canadian.
Well, Mona, you can answer this one with me too, because we read all the applications together this year.
Yes, you did.
It's shocking how, I mean, for me, it's so much about just having a feeling of a person, something at stake in the writing. It didn't feel, because we get a lot of like really polished, competent writing.
Yeah.
That's good. But then you get this feeling of a life in it, right?
Yeah.
That's sort of undeniable, even if it's like raw or flawed, but something's coming through. And we all kind of recognize a lot of the same people, right, in the piles.
Yep. Yeah,
Would
we
you
have
add
that.
when you, what do you read for? This kind of weirdness, right?
Yeah, no, you said it, life. Like that's what I'm looking for. And I can't really define what that's different with every writer, but it just needs to feel alive to me. It's like Margaret Atwood says that, is it alive or isn't it? That's really the only question in the end.
Yeah, is there energy? Is it soulful in this way that writing can be, you know, where you feel something there? Yeah.
And you feel invested to continue. Like you want to be with this voice, because ultimately it's a voice. I mean, you are kind of hearing it in your head as you're reading. It either rings true or it doesn't, you know? So yeah, I agree. I guess one thing I'll ask, just if there's anybody else who wants to ask a question, please drop it in the chat, and I'll just ask Dana this, because this is another one that I wanted to ask. I think every time I finish a book, it kind of changes, because I've been teaching for a few years now. It changes the way that I teach writing. Has moving through the story changed anything about the way that you kind of move through workshop, or the way that you engage stories?
Well, I think it's, for me, every time I'm finish a book, I think it does make you a better teacher, because you can share the struggle that you had, the self-doubt that you had, the wrong turns that you made, the decisions that you can really be very, I think it's important to share your own struggles as an artist with your students, because you know, I think that's you're the most expert about your own work, and talking about your own work something will hit them and give them courage, or give them some, you know, and talking about it technically is important too. I mean, I think those are, you know, nobody cares about that but writers, but it's helpful when it's all in your head, and you break it down into small pieces. So I think just, you know, being honest about your own struggle through I think is helpful, and you're reminded when you finish. And it's like giving birth or something, where you kind of forget about how terrible it was after a couple of months, and then you talk yourself into doing it again, right? Just you kind of forget the pain of childbirth, or so I'm told, because I only did it once. But that's how you kind of con yourself into doing it again, as you forget how painful it was. But there is this little window where you remember all the details of making it, and you can be honest about it, I think.
Yeah, and I think that is very helpful for young writers to hear. Just that it's not, I think, as easy as maybe when you're struggling, you imagine it to be for other people. You know, you imagine it to be this easy, organic thing, but it isn't always. Sometimes, miraculously, it can be like that on a good day, but you know.
And our colleague George Saunders has this great thing about how, you know, when he was working on Lincoln and the Bardo, that it was like, it's kind of thinking of it as a problem you need to solve is part of the creative work, right? So you need to get a certain amount of history in there, and that problem is solved by this technical innovation, this formal idea that he has. So the creative comes out of problems that you're trying to solve. And sometimes when I think of fiction as just being a series of you box yourself into a corner that you've got to get out of, and then the creative solution is actually just so much better than if you didn't have the problem to start with, if that makes any sense, right?
Yes, it's the most exciting thing, when you back yourself into a corner and then you're like, oh my God, how am I going to get out of this? Yeah, and then you creatively find your way out. Did that happen in this book? I'm sure it did many times, but
Yeah.
super
So
excited.
yeah, and those are the aha moments where you're just, you're walking down the street and you're thinking, oh yeah, okay, why don't I do that? And those are so yeah, I think that the constraints as you progress are also the things that lead to the creative leaps too, right?
Yeah, no, I agree completely. I think we'll bring Peter back in now because it's 7 o'clock PST. So,
Or 10 o'clock.
or
Yes.
10 o'clock for everybody on the East Coast.
Well, this has been such a great pleasure. Thank you both so very, very much.
Thank you everybody for coming on the virtual event. I really appreciate it. Thank you. And thank you, Peter. And thank you, Mona.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Such a brilliant book. Everybody get it. Good night.
Good night, y'all.
Night.